I've got a question for you today. Is the church really prepared to address addiction in the 21st century? I don't know if you know the answer to that question or not, but hey, stay tuned. We're going to give you the answer to that question. Dr. Battles, we are back for another exciting episode, and we welcome you again on the set. We're talking about a very exciting topic today, dealing with, is the church really prepared to address addiction in the 21st century? Think about all of the thousands of churches spread across this beautiful country called the United States of America. But the question is, Dr. Battles, are we really prepared to address the addiction issue? What do you think?
I think we can be. So today we're going to talk more about what are the resources, what are the actionable steps that we can take, spiritual and practical, that can help our churches be ready to address this addiction crisis.
So what I'm hearing you really say then is that the church should have an action plan to address addiction. So that means then that the church brings the spiritual component to the table. While we do have those who are addiction recovery specialists, therapists, your mental health workers, all of those people play a critical role, but there is that spiritual component. And that's why we have these addiction recovery ministries that have a spiritual component. Let's talk about that. What are some of the areas that we can look at to where the church can actually get involved in the recovery process?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's 4 things that we want to share with our audience today.
Okay.
Number 1, safety and the reduction of harm. Anyone who comes to our doors, we want to have a plan for their safety, for the safety of the congregation, and the reduction of any harm. The other thing that we want to think about is education and awareness. The more you know, the better you perform. You'll know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So I think that's important that we educate people, because there's a lot of myths about drug addiction, but we want to tell the truth about it, and we want to be able to provide that education and awareness for those individuals. It's also, we talked about it in the last segment, support. We're going to go a little deeper with that as it relates to the resources that are available in our communities and even within our churches. Again, those are areas I think that we can tease out and talk about very specifically. In the other areas, we can't forget the community.
Absolutely.
We have to make sure that we have a community outreach program, and I'm going to add advocacy.
Okay.
So that's the big A for today, advocacy. Okay. So we want to make sure that in those 4 areas, the church can be well equipped. And I wanted to talk about each one individually, because I think each one is going to help us better understand how to how to make an action plan.
So in some of our churches in the urban areas, these large metropolitan areas where this problem is perhaps greater, there are some that at least believe that there should be some things like testing strips and things like Narcan. What do you say on those kinds of things to perhaps combat this issue of fentanyl?
You know, what I do think is important when we talk about harm reduction, I think the most important thing is to have an overdose plan.
Okay.
Whether it involves having Narcan or having strips in the church, that's very controversial, because remember, anyone who uses that medication, Narcan is a medication, has to be well trained. What you don't want to do is set yourself up for a liability, meaning that if everybody doesn't know how to use it, or the person that knows how to use it is not in the building that day, someone has an episode and no one responds, of course we'd call 911.
Right.
But again, the most important thing is to have an overdose plan, and that would be call 911 and make sure the person's safe until help comes. So every church, I believe, should need to have a plan for overdose and protecting our congregations.
And this is, again, coming under the topic of being able to reduce harm, so to speak. Yeah. And the church, do you feel that every church, small, medium, and large churches, need to have an action plan?
Oh, absolutely. Because we know that in every church, there's probably someone that knows someone or has an addiction. And so this plan could be used at home, or in the community. But again, it's important for our ushers and our deacons and our deaconesses to be able to recognize someone who may be under the influence, who may be nodding in and out, who may be having behavioral disruptions within the service, that they could be under the influence. And we want to make sure, again, that everyone is safe.
So having an action plan, if you were the pastor of a local congregation, how would you put an action plan into place? Let's talk a little bit about that. How would that start?
Okay. So it would start by assessing the individual or assessing the situation in the congregation. So an assessment, meaning it could just be, let me just educate my deacons, my elders, myself, on those behaviors or those symptoms of someone that could be under their influence. So that plan includes that assessment. What does that look like? The next one would be, so now we know, but what is that intervention? Does it mean that someone goes sits next to them or stands, if you're not sure, stand on that pew and keep an eye on that individual, right? And then once you have that plan, even offering, if you see a person nodding out, have questions that you can ask. Miss Brown, I see you're nodding out. How are you feeling? Not, are you all right? Okay. That's not the question, because it could be yes. I notice you're nodding in and out. What may be causing that? And really showing care, compassion like Christ. So that's part of the plan. Assessing, interacting with the individual, and then an intervention. Do they need to be assisted to another area? Do I need to just sit beside them? Do I need to find a family member? That's part of the plan. Do any family members go to church, attend church here? If they pass out, how do we contact somebody? Who are we going to contact? What are we going to do? That's part of having a plan. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be 2 and 3 pages, but it needs to be actionable that anyone can do it. If I pick it up, I can read step 1, 2, 3, and 4.
And we have a health ministries team
Yes.
that normally operates in our local churches, so they can be very much a part of this. Perhaps some aspects of community services involved here as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in some of our churches, we do have medical professionals that can assist as well. This action plan, would this be something that would be voted by a church board, you think?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They would need to, yes, they'd have to agree that this is going to work for their church, because every church is very unique to itself. So yes, so that action plan would need to be voted. And again, you bring up a good point. Community services, you know how we have the food program and individuals come and pick up food.
Right.
Sometimes they're walk-ups, people that walk up or come on a bicycle. So everyone within the church would need to be educated on how to use and intervene if they were a crisis related to any type of addiction or fentanyl. Is what we're focusing on.
Okay. Would there need to be something maybe printed up in some kind of print form to make it accessible to the various leaders of the local congregation?
Absolutely. You mentioned the health team. I think that's a great entry point of having them actually be the overseers of it and helping with the education of it. Having it posted, just like they have things posted about, if someone's trafficking, what do you do? I think this is, because the crisis is so great and people are losing their lives, we have to take action that is going to matter.
Okay, very good. So that's clearly one of the things that we would look at, harm reduction. Let's talk a little bit about education and awareness.
Yes.
How does that play into this whole area of addiction?
Well, especially in the church, we tend to overlook it. We tend to turn our head away from it and pretending it's not happening. But because we know it is, I think the most important thing is to even think about doing it once a year or twice a year. You can have a day, substance abuse, addiction recovery day. To educate people. You can bring in professionals, first responders, medical personnel, and medical personnel can tell what the drug, let's say fentanyl, does to the body, how it causes harm. So some people don't realize, they think of the euphoria, the good feeling, the happy medicine, but they need to know what it does to the body and the different organs of the body and how it can be harmful. So the education is a critical piece because many times we don't understand the impact that drug can have on our bodies.
We can also include the police department, their narcotics
yes.
division, where they have officers that are specially trained to go out and educate the community. I remember pastoring a congregation, and they had a drug awareness in our community where we met at City Hall, and we had an officer there that went through the various drugs and the damaging effects that they can have on the body, and what these drug dealers are doing to disguise certain additives that they're putting into these very harmful drugs right now. So the police department would be also one of those critical components that we are able to look at.
I think the education and awareness gives us a reality check, right? So, because parents never want to believe that their child is using, or that their spouse is using drugs, or that their grandchildren are using it. But bringing it into the church setting and actually talking about behaviors and things like that can help us all be more aware of what's happening within our homes and within our communities. And so we can't minimize education, but we can't stop with education either.
Right.
You want to go through the next step. And so really what we're trying to do is, when we educate, we're trying to prevent it from occurring. But we do know that education also helps us to address individuals where it's already occurring as well.
So we talk about education and awareness in the local church, and we talk about having special days, just like we have maybe like a special health day. We can have a special day designed to look at all of the various components of drug addiction and recovery and resources and what's available. What about connecting with other local churches in the community?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I think it's important.
Okay.
I think it's important. And, because there are people in those churches and in our churches who may have testimonies that they can share of how they recovered. Everybody's experience is going to be different. But I think what's going to be important, by connecting with them, it shows that we have the same mission, and that's freeing individuals of addiction. So I think we don't want to kind of be in a silo, because sometimes they may have resources that we do not have. Connecting with other churches within Southeastern, we have regions, 5 regions.
Right.
Again, combining resources, collaborating, all of those can help us with really addressing this addiction problem. And the church can't do it by itself. It does need support from organizations and other, affiliating with other churches even.
We're certified as facilitators for the Journey to Wholeness Ministry, which is a support group for those that have been involved with addiction and recovery. There are at least one entity that we know, one of our churches, that's involved on a weekly basis with a Zoom ministry. Do you think maybe doing a weekly Zoom ministry, do you think that will be a part of this whole education and awareness process?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Zoom is a good platform because you can reach a lot of people. And so I do believe that we could use that platform to help educate and even to engage. I'm going to use the word engage.
All right.
It's not enough to educate that people nod and say, yes, this is good information. Our goal is to move them from being educated to engaging them to actually be advocates. To say, after the program, I want to be involved. So that's going to be really important for us to, let's just add that, educate and engage individuals to help move this mission forward, because we know that everyone with an addiction is a child of God. We know they belong in the church too. And I would say on those special days that we have, Family and Friends Day, Health Ministries Day, it's important that we invite them to church. In fact, every opportunity you have, invite them to come.
Absolutely. Education and awareness.
Yes.
Talk to me about that word awareness. Why perhaps is that word awareness also critical? Is it possible that there are those in our communities that's not aware of the damaging impact that fentanyl is having on our community and on families?
Absolutely. We know that every day people are losing their lives as a result of it. And so it's important as a church that we are very intentional, and that's the key word, intentional about what we do regarding this addiction crisis and what resources we should be using. So we've had a really good conversation so far about the importance of harm reduction strategies, safety, and also about education and awareness. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to another portion, a second portion of our segment that we've been addressing on the action plan that churches can use in addressing the whole addiction problems that we're having in our community. Dr. Battles, we ended the last segment by talking about the importance of awareness, that there are still others in our community, or so many of our community, that are not aware of sometimes the damaging effects of fentanyl. Can you just go back for a moment and reemphasize the point that you were making on the damaging effects of fentanyl and just the general awareness that we should have?
Absolutely. So what we do know is that fentanyl affects every organ in the body. We do know that by taking more than you've been prescribed, that over time, you're at risk, a high risk of overdosing. Because as many people know, that if you take it one time, that gives you a high, the next time you want to get higher and higher and higher, that it does put you at risk. And so I think we don't want to minimize that fentanyl is deadly. It can kill, one dose can kill. And so we want to make sure that we're aware and we're paying attention to people in our homes, in our churches, in our community, so that we can intervene and save their life. Their soul for Christ. And so what we do know is that we also want to make sure that we not only want to save their spiritual soul, but their emotional, their mental. And the way we do that is we make sure that when they come to our churches, we make them feel that they belong. We acknowledge them. We call them by name. Even if you don't know their name, you can introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Jennifer. And introduce them and bring them into the conversation and even offer to sit with them. Those are things that we can do to help with increase in awareness that if we don't do those things and an individual leaves from our safe haven, the sanctuary, the church, we don't want them to go back and feel better getting that hit than they feel in church among the people of God.
Let me emphasize, and I want to underline this, because sometimes our young people think that they're invincible. They're young, they're healthy and strong. But did I hear you say that on occasions, one dose of fentanyl can end the person's life?
Oh, absolutely.
One dose.
One dose.
That's how powerful this drug is.
It's very powerful. And I think, sometimes people think they're going to only see the fentanyl in a powder and this. It can even be in drinks. It can be, people you may go out with friends or whatever. If they're substance users, be careful what you drink, because you don't know what's in the drink. And so again, young people, old people alike, older, need to be mindful that things can be slipped in food and drinks. And if you feel any way after you eat or drink something, that's your clue to ask for help right away. And that's the key word.
And these drug dealers, they really don't care about a person's health or a person's life, because they're in it for the money. They're in it for the greed to make money, to be able to support a certain kind of lifestyle. And so they care nothing about a person's life or health. They want to just make money. So we have to be concerned about our health. Absolutely. And the health of our community.
And I think that to also be very mindful that when they say birds of a feather flock together, be mindful of the individuals that you allow your children and grandchildren associate with, because their judgment, their discernment may not be as good as yours or mine, because we're older. But there's some children, you may see how they behave and how they carry themselves, that you want to caution your child, your grandchild, about those associations, because it could be that those individuals may sway them to participate or even to experiment. That's probably the word, experiment with some type of a drug.
Talk to me a little bit about, though, the challenge that churches still face in this area of stigma, and how we must destigmatize this whole addiction that we are seeing in our communities, because that's a challenge with so many of our members, why perhaps we don't get involved, because there's this stigma that goes along with addiction.
Yes. I think the key message is everyone belongs. Christ died for all. Those are the things that we have to understand. You and I, we struggle with different sins, but sin is sin. And so the fact that if we had that opportunity that someone walked into our church sat in the pew. That's our opportunity. God sent them there for us to be able to help them feel like they belong there, to show them love and compassion, to support them on the way, even to connect them to resources. So if they come in the church, we should be celebrating. Celebrating the opportunity to serve them with love and kindness.
Absolutely.
So again, it is a stigma, and the only way we can break, or one of the ways we can break it, is by talking out loud like we are. It happens, we know it happens. We're not going to cover it up.
If I understand the church's role and responsibility, it is to minister. And that is not just to some people, but we are to minister to all people, all humanity, even those who are addicted to fentanyl.
Yes. Well, you know, the church is a hospital.
Absolutely.
It is. And
Absolutely.
so anyone who comes in there is seeking Christ, and we want to connect them to Christ, even in the fentanyl crisis.
Okay.
We want to bring them closer to Christ.
Hey, talk to me about now the third area of the action plan, and that is support and recovery ministry.
Let me tell you, that's pretty easy. Our churches are pretty much available, Monday through Thursday. Sometimes, and you really need qualified people to run these support groups. But what I have learned is many support groups are run by individuals who have had addictions themselves. So like the AA, who runs a group, are the ones who have actually recovered. And the more you educate and educate others, then that helps you stay sober. So one of the things that churches can consider is connecting with or collaborating with support groups that are in the community.
Okay.
And even offering space at the church to host the meetings there. Again, I would say that's a pretty easy way. You're not really putting on any resources. You're just providing the space for individuals to be there. And if they know it's a safe haven spiritually, they then will possibly come for the recovery programs as well.
Okay. Now there are some other areas that we can look at when we talk about support ministry, and that is, what about celebrating recovery? How do we deal with that as a support means? Celebrating recovery.
I would say we need to celebrate more than we talk about, more than we complain or criticize. We need to celebrate more. What that means is when we know that someone has come into our space, into our place, we've had a chance to walk along the journey with them. If they recovered for a week or a month, we should be celebrating. Remember, the Bible talks about if one soul comes to Christ, whole heaven, they're celebrating.
Absolutely.
So again, we should celebrate and cheer them on. You're doing really good, Pastor Hall. You've done great. You've made it for a month. You've made it for 30 days. You've made it for 60 or 90 days. We should celebrate more. Just as we celebrate birthdays, when we celebrate, it shows that God has shown his favor. He's preserved us another month, another year, whatever that is. And most times we don't allow people to tell their testimony, but that's part of the celebration.
I love that.
Letting them tell how Christ has brought them out and how they feel better as a result of it.
I love that. Peer support groups. You mentioned earlier that some who have overcome addiction, that they are sometimes the better ones or the best ones to be able to give support, or to support, or I should say to lead a support group. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
You know, what I've learned is that when they say each one teach one or reach one, when we're able to tell someone about how we overcame, then they view it, they see it as possible. So yes, peer to peer. If I try to tell someone about, let's say, a fentanyl addiction, I've not been in those shoes before. So individuals are more likely to listen to someone who has been in that space and place and struggle with it, because it's not easy, I understand, to give up any addiction, whether it's food or social media. Any addiction, once it grips you, it's very difficult to give up.
And what about mentorship? Before we go to the last segment that you mentioned as far as an action plan, what about mentorship? How do we mentor those who have an addiction issue?
Well, I would even back it up even more. How do we mentor those who have parents or friends or siblings who have an addiction? Because what you want to do is mentor them to help them process, whether it's been pain, trauma, environmental situations, mentor them to tell them there's other coping mechanisms.
Okay.
So I think sometimes we don't tell what the coping mechanism is. but we really need to tell them not only to pray about it and read scriptures, but direct them to resources. So that would be one, I would say, start there. Pay attention to the family. Sometimes we're so focused on the person with the addiction, we forget about the family, that they're suffering as well. They're being affected as well. So mentorship could be mentoring children or even mentoring spouses. Maybe someone in the church has a spouse who has an addiction, and maybe yours had an addiction, and you just, walking alongside them. So sometimes we look at the children, but adults also have addictions. Okay. And so being there for them and supporting them.
All right. And one of the last action plans that you mentioned was community outreach and advocacy. Let's spend some time talking about that. What do we mean when we say community outreach and advocacy? How does that play into this whole addiction system that we're talking about here?
Wow, that's a really good question. Our community outreach has to be focused and intentional. We can't just say get off drugs, stop drugs. Years ago they had the DARE program in the school, so they had the presence of police officers. They did a lot of education. All that's really important. And so we want to be advocates in a more focused way, focused with what do they need to help them to overcome it? What are the triggers that they're dealing with? Are they without a job? So they're trying to, mask that emotional pain. Have they gone through grief or loss or divorce? So again, advocacy again is broad, really broad, but really knowing what the needs of the individual is most important, and then responding to that need. So it's really speaking up for access to treatment centers. Some of these treatment centers cost to go to them. And we may not be equipped within the church, depending on the severity of the addiction, to assist them. But they maybe could go to a treatment center, but they can't afford it. So being an advocate means, how do we generate funds, or how do we get, someone to sponsorship for those programs? That would be another way to be an advocate.
Okay, all right. So when we talk further, let's look at reentry programs. Someone that's maybe coming out of a drug rehab program, how do we help them with reentry?
I love that word, reentry. I don't think we always think about that. We may know individuals who have gone to the drug rehab program and now they're coming back home in that same environment. Are there triggers there? What support do they need? I know this is not with addiction, but when my father was coming home from the rehab center, we had to meet the physical therapist at the house, and they had to look through, they assessed the home. Can he get through the door with the walker? So again, helping them re-enter into the home, or maybe they don't have their home anymore, maybe they've lost their family. How do we help them with housing or transportation or childcare? So that re-entry is a really important part for the church not to miss. We know I went out for the training or getting my help, but now I'm coming back even to the church. How do we re-enter them into the church and get them involved? So again, begin to thinking proactively, what are their skills? What do they enjoy doing? And how can they participate in ministry? So that's going to be really important to have that conversation.
Okay. What about commemorating victims that have lost their lives? Is that something that comes into play here? Remembering those who've overdosed? Is that a part of this whole?
It could be. That is a very sensitive topic, because you have to think about the families. If they've lost someone through an overdose, that can be a very sensitive topic. So again, that would take prayerful consideration and having maybe a focus group to talk about how to do that. But what I would say, Pastor Hall, that we've had a really good conversation about how to equip our churches with making sure that it's a safe environment, making sure that we have education and increasing that awareness. I'm having a support group, and I love this last one we talked about was community outreach and advocacy. And so it's my hope and my prayer that from this conversation today that you've learned something that you can do. Don't think about what you can't do. Even if it's just one thing of having an action plan, that's something that we can do as a church to make sure that we're fully equipped to minister to the needs of individuals with addictions. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, help us on this journey. Make sure your voice is heard and you're an advocate and fully engaged and help us to address this fentanyl addiction crisis, which is not only close to home, but that may be occurring in our churches.